Nigeria's COVID-19 tally climbs to more than 16,000 as 403 new cases were added on Sunday. The United Nations condemns Boko Haram killings and attacks in Borno State. In international news, Atlanta protesters take to the streets as another black man is shot and killed. And in sport, Dillian White takes legal step against the World Boxing Council. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Nigeria's race against the COVID-19 pandemic is being slowed by daily confirmation of high numbers of infection in the country, as more than 400 cases were recorded on Sunday. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control announced 403 new infections were recorded on Sunday, of which Gombe shares 73 cases and Lagos 68. National tally now stands at 16,085. Meanwhile, 22 new cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed in Enugu State, raising to 57 the total number of COVID-19 cases in the state. Health Commissioner Professor Ikechukwu Obi said in a statement in Enugu on Monday, 23 of the 57 cases are health workers. The United Nations has condemned the attack on civilians, aid workers, and facility in Munguno, Borno State on Saturday. UN Humanitarian Coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Cullen, issued a statement on Sunday that he was appalled by the continued violent attacks launched by non-state armed groups in civilian areas in Borno State. Boko Haram terrorists were said to have invaded Goni Usmanti community in Moguno on Saturday and clashed with the military for about 2 hours and reached the humanitarian hub where 58 workers were present at the time of the attack. The humanitarian coordinator says the facility was directly targeted and sustained light damage. He said the facility staff were safe. The UN says such attacks limits the ability of aid workers to stay and deliver assistance to at least 150,000 internally displaced persons in remote areas of the state. Many civilians, including a 4-year-old girl, were reported killed while several others were injured. A 42-year-old Indian passenger on an Air India evacuation flight from Lagos to Mumbai was said to have died on board over the weekend. The passenger was said to have had fever on board and was given oxygen when he demonstrated difficulty in breathing. Air India ruled out coronavirus as the cause of death. It says the passenger died of natural causes. The airline says had the passenger had coronavirus, it would have been detected during the airport's medical screening in Lagos before boarding the flight. The airline says it has deposited the corpse at a hospital in Mumbai upon landing. It also says full fumigation of its flight was carried out in line with prescribed norms. The new coronavirus pandemic has affected every fabric of Nigeria's life, including the famed Nollywood film industry that pumps up to $1 billion a year into the Nigerian economy. Nollywood is back from COVID-19 hiatus, gradually adapting to new operational measures that guide the new way of doing business. Correspondent Kelechi Mekalam reports.
The cameras are rolling again on the set of the popular series Halita, as Nigeria restarts its entertainment industry after the COVID-19 lockdown. The suspense-filled story on social issues, trafficking and justice has garnered viewers across Africa. For lead actor Mofe Duncan, it's a delight to be back at work.
The fact that I'm back on set is great because, one thing, it's good to see people. It's good to learn that people survived the virus, or a lot of us who have come back are still alive and are healthy and things like that. Also, it's what I love doing. I love being in front of the camera. I think that a lot of us have suppressed our creativity a lot because we've not been able to express ourselves.
Nollywood is rated the second largest employer in Nigeria, with more than 1 million people working in the industry. The industry produces an average 50 movies weekly, second only to India's Bollywood. But all of that is changing as producers cut back on costs and crews.
Social distancing thing is pretty much the reason why you have to cut down. I give an example. We have a 70-man crew that has been cut down to 12.
Not just that, operations are different now as producers ensure they adhere to other safety guidelines.
We have the temperature reader, where we get to make sure that everybody walking in here is within the compliant temperature.
Nollywood movies have gained even more global traction, featuring on digital platforms like Netflix. The industry generates an average $590 million annually. That represents 0.21% of the country's GDP. Many worry that future gains could be hampered by the coronavirus outbreak. But this could also be an opportunity, forcing industry players to innovate when it comes to producing content.
If you operate a club center in Lagos, you need to listen to this. The Lagos State government says you must obtain safety compliance certificates before you restart your operation. The government says it has begun physical verification and issuance of safety compliance certificates to social clubs and centers in the state. Director General of Lagos State Safety Commission, Lanre Mojola, expressed satisfaction at the level of compliance with stipulated safety guidelines by most of the clubs his team had so far visited. He said it was very imperative that club centers comply with all directives, especially on physical distancing and proper hygiene. He called on all social events and betting centers, bars, nightclubs, gaming arcades, casinos, and others who fall under the Register to Open initiative to register as soon as possible to allow the verification process to take place. Mojola warned that those who have completed the process should not open until Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu announces the effective date for social centers to open. Coming up, African news. African migrants said to have a mast ready to embark on treacherous journeys to reach European ports. And later, international news. Atlanta protesters take to the streets as another black man is shot and killed.
You are watching ANN.
Remember that I want marry. She dey come my house today. I'm gonna tell her to marry me.
Remember what I taught you about playing music from the internet?
I'm gonna play romantic music for her. The phone remains small, make it done. Will you marry me? I have a surprise for you. Google, play me a romantic music. Everything is okay. Network is shaky. Google, play me a romantic music. Google, play me a romantic music.
Maybe I should go.
Don't let poor internet ruin special moments. Join the super fast and reliable 4G network and get double data.
Now in the watch.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Measures to combat the COVID-19 pandemic has stalled many activities in South Sudan. Education has been at a standstill in the midst of the lockdown in the country. Now the government is using radio waves to deliver lectures to students in the country. Patrick Oyet has the story.
Education on air.
Nunu Nabil is a 19-year-old student. She is due to sit South Sudan Secondary School Certificate Examination this year.
Lessons are based on the new national curriculum.
But with schools closed, she is now relying on a radio program run by South Sudan's government with support from UNESCO.
Through the origin.
However, Nunu says it is not the same as being in class.
Learning in school, the teacher is there. And you can ask him the question you don't understand. And if he's not in the class even, you can go to him in the office. but learning to radio from the radio. You cannot ask.
To negative F, where
the radio lessons don't cover all the subjects, and the program is currently run on only 2 radio stations in the country, making the lessons inaccessible to some.
There are plans underway to involve the community radios so that we can extensively reach many school children as far as possible.
UNESCO is supporting the radio program to ensure that education does not stop because of COVID-19. It is receiving funding from Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Dubai. However, it says more funds are still needed to support education over the longer term.
We need classrooms, a school environment that is good and can prevent disease. Learning can continue even in periods of pandemic or any other concern. So we need to be thinking big. We need to be thinking for the future of the children.
Education in South Sudan consists of 8 years in primary school, followed by 4 years of secondary education, and then 4 years of university instruction. But that education has been disrupted for thousands of children because of civil war and now the coronavirus. South Sudan's government says 73% of the country's population are illiterate due to the long years of civil war, and that education remains one of its top priorities. The country's education ministry says it will continue to explore new alternatives to provide education to as many people as possible.
Experts have warned that apart from direct dramatic human consequences, the COVID-19 pandemic could have a long-term strong adverse impact in Africa as it hits the continent's economies. As Giron Chala reports, the African Continental Free Trade Area could help in easing the economic pain COVID-19 would unleash on the continent.
Come post-COVID-19, Africa is banking on its continental free trade area. Studies show that the free trade area has the potential to increase growth, raise welfare, and stimulate industrial development on the continent.
African countries now have to engage in value-adding activities for their commodities, and they'll find a large market in the African continental free trade area of 1.2 billion people with a young population, which offers a very huge consumer base. So this is how we see the African continental free trade area. And immediately the opportunities arise. Let's reignite our unit through the African continental free trade area so that we facilitate the emergence of trade across Africa using this platform. That's the only way of ensuring that we regenerate our economies faster.
Already, due to the impact of COVID-19, hundreds of thousands of jobs could be lost across the continent. But the current reality is also providing opportunities for African countries. Accelerated intra-regional trade is one of them.
Another aspect that is emerging is that as a result of lockdowns, a lot of young entrepreneurs are coming across Africa to increase their participation in e-commerce. Because if you look around a lot of African countries, the supermarkets are there. They are being sanitized every day. But few people have the courage to go there because they don't want to be infected. So the only way to deliver products to the people is through e-commerce. And when you deliver, then the people who are receiving the products can sanitize those products. So there's an opportunity for e-commerce.
The African Union is urging African states to ease trade restrictions and barriers for the continental free trade area to deliver better for member states. The good news is the Africa Centers for Disease Control has rolled out a safe economy unlocking strategy for countries.
We've issued guidelines for countries on how to unlock the systems and economy in a stepwise manner, but that has to be backed by an aggressive and bold measures to implement PAC, which is underpinned by 3 areas: ability to scale up testing, ability to deploy large number of foot soldiers so that they can conduct contact tracing and preparing healthcare facilities to treat large and take care of large number of patients.
The African Continental Free Trade Area, launched 2 years ago at the African Union Summit in Kigali, Rwanda, was launched to be implemented from 1st July 2020. But this has been postponed until 2021 because of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Experts say, however mouth-watering the Africa Free Trade Area plans look on paper, successful implementation is still key.
Now that lockdowns are being lifted in European countries, thousands of African migrants are said to be preparing to resume treacherous journeys to try crossing into the continent. Italian authorities are worried that a new wave of immigrants reaching their soil may be inevitable, especially with good weather, calm seas and the reopening of the economy. They quote intelligence sources that more than 20,000 migrants are already in North Africa, ready to begin their dangerous journeys. More than 6,000 migrants are reported to have already arrived in Italy this year, a much higher number than all of last year when only 2,000 arrived on Italy's shores.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. The streets of America have continued to erupt in outrage after another fatal police shooting of a black man in Atlanta, Georgia on Friday. A police officer was caught on camera as he killed Rayshard Brooks, who had slept off in his car at the drive-through lane of a fast food restaurant. The unarmed black man was shot in the back as he was running away from the police officers. The officer who fired the fatal shot, Garrett Wolf, has lost his job. His partner at the scene, Devin Brosnan, has been placed on administrative leave, and Atlanta's police chief has resigned over the shooting. Demonstrators have showed anger on Saturday as they set ablaze the Wendy's fast food restaurant where Brooks was killed. A Fulton County medical examiner has ruled as homicide the death of the 27-year-old Brooks. This killing is the latest in a string of police murders of African-American men that have prompted nationwide protests seeking to put an end to police brutality and systemic racism in the United States. The medical examiner's autopsy found Brooks was shot in the back twice and died from organ damage and blood loss. More than 20,000 Black Lives Matter protesters marched across New Zealand, with some 5,000 taken to the streets of Wellington, the nation's capital. The marches came just days after the country returned to normal following weeks of no confirmed new COVID-19 cases. And correspondent Owen Perland has the details.
This is one of the biggest demonstrations seen in New Zealand for many years. The protesters are mostly young and they come from very diverse backgrounds, and they're here for two reasons. One is to support, give solidarity to the American people who are protesting against police discrimination in the United States and of course the tragic death of George Floyd. But they're also here to protest against racism in New Zealand. The organisers of the rally say that 9 out of 10 people targeted and assaulted by the police come from ethnic communities, and they say 2/3 of the people killed by the police are also Indigenous people. Now their voices are being heard. Only last week New Zealand's Police Commissioner scrapped plans to deploy armed response teams on city streets because of public opposition. Now the authorities say that obviously New Zealanders don't want that style of policing here, but the protesters say that's not enough. Some of them want defunding of the police, and they also want more money spent on social work and less money spent on law enforcement. Now there's a lot of police present here. but they're staying in the background because this protest is peaceful. It's a far cry from the violent and bloody confrontations that happened here almost 40 years ago in 1981, when police in riot gear chased and beat people who were protesting against racism and apartheid in South Africa. Now, as a matter of fact, you will see the people behind me, very few of them are wearing masks, and there's no social distancing. And that's because the New Zealand government announced only last week that New Zealand has eliminated COVID-19. So there's no need for any social distancing or mass gatherings can go ahead. Now, it just so happens that these protesters coincide, as in many other countries, with growing calls to remove historic statues that many people say represent colonial racism in this country. Some statues have already been removed, but it remains to be seen what change will come from these protests.
France has lifted a number of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions in the country. Cafes and restaurants are reopening across France, and travel to other European countries will soon be allowed, and people will also be able to visit family members in retirement homes. Germany, Belgium, Croatia and Switzerland are fully reopening borders with European Union countries effective today. Meanwhile, UK and Spanish travelers to France are being asked to quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival. More than 29,000 persons have died of coronavirus in France, out of the more than 190,000 confirmed cases. President Macron first imposed a strict lockdown in March. The United Nations has agreed to a request from African countries to urgently debate racism and police brutality in the U.S. and beyond over George Floyd's death, as the 43rd session of the UN Human Rights Council resumes after a break in March over the coronavirus pandemic. Council President Elizabeth Tietje-Vliesberger promised to hold the debate on Wednesday. It is only the 5th time in the Council's 14-year history that it has agreed to hold an urgent debate, which is a special debate agreed upon within a regular session of the Council. Up next, sports. Dillian Whyte takes legal step against World Boxing Council.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sport, Arsenal striker Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang says his decision on whether to sign a new deal with the club is a turning point in his career. Aubameyang's contract ends in 12 months. Aubameyang has scored 61 goals in 97 appearances for the Gunners since moving to the club from Borussia Dortmund in 2018. British professional boxer Dillian Whyte has taken legal steps against the World Boxing Council over the date of the mandatory WBC heavyweight title fight. Whyte defeated Oscar Rivas by unanimous decision in a WBC final eliminator last July to secure his mandatory shot at the WBC belt currently held by Tyson Fury. Whyte is presently upset about a lengthy wait for a WBC title fight. WBC President Suleiman says there is always a procedure. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Have a pleasant evening.